They called her a disgrace, a liability who cost Marines their lives. Sarah Phantom Morgan had been living in self-imposed exile in the Montana mountains for 3 years, dismissed from the Corps after a classified mission went catastrophically wrong. When 24 Navy SEALs found themselves surrounded by over 150 international arms dealers and mercenaries in Devil's Backbone Valley, every available sniper was either dead wounded or pinned down by heavy fire. That's when someone remembered the disgraced Marine living alone at 8,000 feet elevation. What happened next took exactly 73 minutes in 42 precisely placed shots from positions that military tacticians had deemed impossible to reach, changing everything the Pentagon thought they knew about mountain warfare and the meaning of redemption. Snow began falling before dawn across the Devil's Backbone Mountains, each flake catching the pale moonlight like fragments of shattered glass. Sarah Morgan stood on the wraparound porch of her isolated cabin, steam rising from her coffee mug into the bitter February air. At 29, she possessed the lean, weathered build of someone who had spent years surviving in conditions that broke weaker people. Her auburn hair, now shoulder-length and free from military regulations, caught the wind as she scanned the valley below through instincts that 3 years of exile hadn't managed to erase. The cabin sat perched on a granite ledge overlooking Cascade Ridge, Montana, a town so small it barely qualified for inclusion on most maps. Sarah had chosen this location specifically for its isolation and tactical advantages. 3 escape routes, clear fields of fire in every direction, and enough warning time to disappear if anyone came looking for the disgraced Marine who had once been considered among the Corps' most promising snipers. Her breath formed small clouds as she sipped the strong black coffee, a habit retained from countless pre-dawn missions in places the Pentagon preferred not to acknowledge publicly. The Barrett M82A1 rifle leaning against the cabin wall remained within arm's reach, though she hadn't fired it at anything more threatening than mountain predators in over 2 years. Some habits died harder than others. Arthur Martinez emerged from the tree line below his weathered face and deliberate movements, marking him as someone who understood mountain survival. At 68, the retired Army Ranger had become Sarah's closest neighbor and reluctant mentor, though he lived nearly 4 miles away down a treacherous mountain path that most people couldn't navigate in daylight, let alone in pre-dawn darkness. "Coffee's still hot if you want some," Sarah called down to him, her voice carrying easily in the thin mountain air. Art climbed the final stretch to her porch, his breathing steady despite the altitude and steep ascent. The man moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who had spent decades in combat zones, his body bearing the scars of service that most civilians would never understand. "Figured you'd be up," Art said, accepting the mug she handed him and wrapping his calloused fingers around the ceramic warmth. "Heard helicopters about an hour ago heading northeast toward Devil's Backbone Valley. Military birds. Sounded like Navy multiple aircraft flying low and fast." Sarah's posture straightened slightly, old instincts responding to information that might indicate military activity in her territory. Her mind automatically processed the data. Multiple helicopters, Navy designation, low altitude approach, pre-dawn timing. Unusual flight pattern for a training exercise. The two sat in comfortable silence, watching the snow accumulate on the pine branches below. Art had never asked about Sarah's military service beyond what she'd volunteered, and she'd never pressed him for details about the missions that had left him with a pronounced limp and old shrapnel scars visible on his forearms. Their friendship had developed through mutual respect for privacy and shared understanding of what it meant to carry invisible wounds from service most people couldn't comprehend. Art Martinez had his own ghosts. Gulf War 1991, Operation Desert Storm. He'd been there when the coalition forces pushed into Kuwait, part of the Ranger battalions that conducted deep reconnaissance behind enemy lines. 43 confirmed kills over 6 weeks of sustained operations. Then Somalia 93. Black Hawk Down. He'd pulled 3 wounded soldiers out of the kill zone while taking shrapnel to his left leg and back. The physical wounds had healed. The others never did, but the wound that cut deepest came years later. Iraq, 2008. His son, David Martinez, 23 years old, Marine Corps lieutenant, died when his convoy hit an IED outside Fallujah. Art had trained the boy since childhood, taught him everything about survival and warfare, and still couldn't save him from a bomb buried in desert sand 5,000 miles away. After David's death, Art had retreated to these mountains, seeking isolation from a world that kept taking the things he loved. Then 3 years ago, he'd found Sarah stumbling through a blizzard drunk and hypothermic, a loaded pistol in her jacket pocket, and death in her eyes. He'd carried her back to his cabin, sobered her up, and made her a promise. I lost my son. I won't lose another kid, not on my watch. You ever miss it? Art asked, eventually nodding toward the Barrett rifle that remained perpetually within Sarah's reach. Sarah considered the question while studying the distant peaks where those helicopters had disappeared. I miss the certainty, she said finally, knowing exactly what your mission was, what success looked like, who you could trust to have your back. She paused, her jaw tightening with remembered pain. But not the politics, especially not the politics. Not when the mission parameters change after you're already committed. When the intelligence turns out to be fabricated. When your own command structure becomes the enemy. She left the sentence unfinished, but Art understood. He'd been there himself decades ago, when operational realities conflicted with political narratives and good soldiers paid the price for institutional failures. 3 years earlier, Gunnery Sergeant Sarah Morgan had been leading a reconnaissance team in a classified operation that officially never happened. The intelligence had been perfect, the mission parameters clear, the tactical situation straightforward. Eliminate a high-value target who was coordinating arms shipments to terrorist organizations. One shot, one kill, mission complete. Except the target had been an undercover CIA asset whose identity had been deliberately concealed from military commanders. Sarah's successful completion of her assigned mission had eliminated a key intelligence source and compromised an ongoing operation worth millions of dollars and countless lives. The subsequent investigation had painted her as a rogue operator who had exceeded her authority and ignored proper verification protocols. The truth buried beneath layers of classified documents and political maneuvering was that Sarah had followed orders exactly as given by commanders who had been deliberately kept uninformed about CIA operations in the same area. She had become the perfect scapegoat for an intelligence failure that reached the highest levels of military and civilian leadership. Her discharge had been swift, quiet, and carried implications that made finding civilian employment in any related field virtually impossible. The Marine Corps she had served with distinction for 8 years had erased her existence as efficiently as she had once eliminated targets through a rifle scope. Sometimes I think about what I could have done differently. Sarah continued, her gaze still fixed on the distant mountains. But every scenario leads to the same conclusion. I was set up to fail from the beginning. Art nodded slowly. He had seen enough military politics during his own service to understand how good soldiers could be sacrificed to protect institutional interests. Anger's useful fuel, he said, his voice carrying the weight of hard-earned wisdom. But it's terrible navigation. Question is, have you figured out where you're headed next? Sarah had been grappling with that question for 3 years. The disability payments from her military service were enough to maintain her isolated existence, but not enough to build any kind of meaningful future. She had skills that were valuable but highly specialized experience that was extensive but largely classified, and a reputation that made her unemployable in any field related to her military specialty. Sometimes I think about moving further north, she admitted, finding someplace even more remote. Other times I think about trying to clear my name, proving what really happened on that mission. Both sound like running to me, Art observed with the gentle honesty of someone who had earned the right to speak difficult truths. Question is, what are you running toward or running from? Before Sarah could respond, the satellite phone inside her cabin began ringing, with a distinctive tone reserved for emergency contacts. She had given that number to exactly 3 people. Art, her former team medic who had remained loyal despite her disgrace, and Colonel Rebecca Stone, her former commanding officer who had been forced to sign Sarah's discharge papers while privately acknowledging the injustice of the situation. Sarah rose quickly, coffee mug abandoned on the porch railing. She grabbed the phone from its charging station near the kitchen window, recognizing the area code that meant military communication. Morgan, she answered, her voice automatically shifting to the professional tone that 3 years of civilian life hadn't erased. Sarah, this is Rebecca Stone. The colonel's voice carried a strain that immediately put Sarah on high alert. They hadn't spoken in 6 months. Stone wouldn't be calling now unless something had gone catastrophically wrong. I need you to listen carefully, Stone continued without preamble. There's a situation developing in your area that requires immediate assistance from someone with your specific skill set. Sarah felt her pulse increase, old instincts responding to the tone that meant operational urgency. What kind of situation? Well, Navy SEAL team conducting classified operations in Devil's Backbone Valley. They walked into what appears to be a coordinated ambush by a large force of well-equipped hostiles. Current intelligence suggests they're facing over 150 fighters with heavy weapons, organized positions, and extensive knowledge of the terrain. The implications hit Sarah immediately. A SEAL team wouldn't be caught in that kind of trap unless they had been specifically set up, which meant intelligence failure, communication compromise, or outright betrayal. The same kind of factors that had destroyed her own military career. How many SEALs, she asked, already calculating tactical possibilities. 24 operators. SEAL Team 7. They established defensive positions in an abandoned mining complex, but they're surrounded and taking heavy casualties. Weather conditions prevent air support or extraction until dawn, which is still 6 hours away. Sarah closed her eyes, visualizing the terrain around Devil's Backbone Valley. She had hiked every trail, climbed every ridge, and mapped every tactical advantage in that area during her 3 years of self-imposed exile. The abandoned mining complex Colonel Stone mentioned in was a death trap if someone controlled the surrounding high ground. But it also created opportunities for a skilled sniper operating from elevated positions. What about other assets in the area? Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Every qualified sniper within 300 miles is either deployed overseas, killed in the initial ambush, or pinned down with the main force. The nearest reinforcements are 12 hours away, minimum. Stone paused, and Sarah could hear the weight of command responsibility in the silence. Sarah, these men are going to die unless someone with your capabilities can provide immediate assistance. Through the kitchen window, Sarah could see Art watching her with patient attention, understanding that important conversations often determine the course of lives. The Barrett rifle on the porch seemed to catch the early morning light differently, as if responding to the possibility that its long period of inactivity might be ending. Colonel, you know my current status, Sarah said carefully. If I engage hostile forces, I'll be operating without official sanction, military support, or legal protection. If something goes wrong, Sarah, Stone interrupted, her voice carrying both urgency and something that sounded like personal plea. 24 American servicemen are going to die in the next few hours unless someone intervenes. I can't order you to act, but I can tell you that you're the only person in the region with the skills and equipment necessary to make a difference. Sarah looked out at the mountains where she had spent 3 years hiding from a world that had betrayed her trust and destroyed her career. Those same mountains now contain Navy SEALs who were facing death because of the same kind of intelligence failures and political maneuvering that had cost her everything she had once valued. The choice seemed clear, even though the consequences remained unpredictable. Send me the tactical situation and grid coordinates, Sarah said, her voice taking on the professional tone that had been dormant for 3 years. I'll need current intelligence on enemy positions, weather forecasts, and communication protocols for contact with the SEAL team. Sarah, Stone said, her voice carrying a mixture of relief and concern. This is completely voluntary. No one will question your decision if you choose not to get involved. Sarah walked to the porch where Art waited with patient understanding. The Barrett rifle seemed to be waiting as well, like a faithful partner ready to resume a relationship that had been interrupted by circumstances beyond either of their control. Colonel, send the intelligence package. I'll establish overwatch positions and begin target assessment within the hour. As she ended the call, Art stood and moved to the porch railing, his gaze fixed on the distant peaks where American servicemen were fighting for their lives against overwhelming odds. Guess that answers your question about what direction you're headed, he said quietly. Sarah began calculating equipment loads, route planning, and tactical considerations that would determine whether 24 SEALs lived or died before sunset. For the first time in 3 years, she felt the clarity that came with having a mission that mattered more than her own survival. Time to find out if 3 years of exile taught me anything useful, she said, reaching for the Barrett rifle with movements that felt like greeting an old friend. But before she could begin her preparations, Stone's voice came back over the satellite phone, now carrying information that changed everything. Sarah, there's something else you need to know, something I should have told you first. Sarah's hand froze on the rifle stock. Stone's tone had shifted from operational urgency to something more personal, more dangerous. The person who set up that SEAL team, who planned this entire ambush. It's Captain Peter Lockwood. The name hit Sarah like a physical blow. Peter Lockwood, her former mentor. The man who had taught her advanced sniper tactics. The man who had been court-martialed for selling intelligence to foreign buyers. The man who had orchestrated the Firebase Delta incident to cover his own crimes and destroy her career in the process. Lockwood is the second in command for Harrison Mansfield's organization, Stone continued. He knows you, Sarah. He knows how you think, how you operate. This entire situation, there's intelligence suggesting it might be a trap, not just for the SEALs, for you. Sarah's grip tightened on the Barrett. 3 years ago, when she'd reported Lockwood's illegal activities, he'd responded by feeding false intelligence to the CIA and setting her up to kill an undercover asset. He'd destroyed her career, her reputation, and nearly her life. And now he was out there in those mountains commanding mercenaries and killing American servicemen. Then he's going to learn something, Sarah said, her voice cold and steady. I'm not the same Marine he betrayed 3 years ago. I'm the ghost he created. Art stepped closer, placing a weathered hand on her shoulder. If you walk into that valley, kid, you might not walk out. Lockwood knows your playbook. He'll have planned for you. Sarah looked at the old ranger, seeing concern mixed with something else. Pride, perhaps. Understanding. The same look David Martinez might have seen from his father before his final deployment. Aren't those SEALs? Their team leader is Lieutenant Commander Marcus Rivers, 34 years old. Father was Thomas Rivers. Art's expression changed, decades of memory flooding back. Tom Rivers, Gulf War. We served together in Kuwait. He saved my life during the push to Kuwait City. Took 3 bullets meant for me. Made me promise, his voice caught. Made me promise that if anything happened to him, I'd watch over his boy. Tom died in Desert Storm, February 26, 1991. Marcus is his son, Sarah said quietly, and right now he's going to die in that valley unless someone helps him. Art was silent for a long moment, staring at the distant mountains where the son of his fallen brother in arms was fighting for his life. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of old promises and warrior codes that transcended time and circumstance. Then you walk into that trap, Art said, and you burn it down from the inside. For Tom, for those boys who don't deserve to die because of political games. And for you, Sarah, because 3 years ago they took your honor. Today you take it back. Inside her cabin, Sarah moved with mechanical precision through preparations she hadn't performed in 3 years. Each piece of equipment held specific purpose weight calculated against tactical value. The Barrett M82A1 received first attention. Cleaning kit, scope adjustment tools, and match-grade ammunition sorted into protective cases. 47 rounds total, each cartridge capable of eliminating targets at distances exceeding 2 kilometers under optimal conditions. Arthur watched from the doorway as she assembled her gear with the methodical care of a professional returning to deadly work. How much territory are we talking about? He asked. Devil's Backbone Valley covers roughly 12 square miles of granite cliffs, abandoned mining tunnels, and alpine forest, Sarah replied, sliding ceramic trauma plates into her tactical vest. Multiple elevation changes, limited visibility. Perfect terrain for coordinated ambush tactics. Her hands moved through equipment selection without conscious thought, muscle memory overriding 3 years of civilian existence. Rangefinder night vision scope, climbing gear, emergency medical supplies, water purification tablets, high-energy rations calculated for extended operations. Total pack weight, 63 pounds, manageable for someone who had maintained rigorous physical conditioning despite her exile. The satellite phone buzzed with incoming data transmission. Sarah connected her beruggedized tablet, downloading classified intelligence that painted a tactical picture worse than Colonel Stone's initial assessment had suggested. 24 Navy SEALs from SEAL Team 7 had infiltrated Devil's Backbone Valley, targeting Harrison Mansfield, an international arms dealer whose organization supplied advanced weaponry to terrorist networks across 3 continents. Intelligence indicated Mansfield was conducting a major transaction involving stolen military hardware worth approximately $40 million. The operation had been planned as a standard capture or eliminate mission. SEAL teams would establish overwatch positions, identify high-value targets, and either extract Mansfield alive or eliminate him if extraction proved impossible. Simple, straightforward, executed successfully dozens of times by similar units. But Harrison Mansfield had earned his reputation through 15 years of surviving military and law enforcement attempts to neutralize his operations. The intelligence package revealed a man who possessed intimate knowledge of American special operations tactics, having served as a military contractor in Iraq and Afghanistan before transitioning to illegal arms dealing. His organization included former Special Forces operators from multiple nations, creating a force capable of matching American tactical capabilities. Sarah studied satellite imagery showing the abandoned Copper Creek mining complex where the SEALs had established their defensive perimeter. 3 main buildings connected by covered walkways surrounded by equipment yards and waste piles that provided some concealment but limited mobility. The complex sat in a natural bowl formation surrounded by elevated positions that offered commanding views of every approach and escape route. Perfect killing ground if someone controlled the high ground. Her radio crackled with encrypted communication from Colonel Stone. "Phantom, this is Control. Current tactical update. SEAL team engaged for approximately 90 minutes. Casualties unknown, but intercepted communications indicate ammunition running low." Sarah keyed her microphone. "Control Phantom. Request specific intelligence on enemy capabilities and positioning. Preliminary assessment suggests enemy force exceeding 150 personnel equipped with heavy machine guns, rocket-propelled grenades, and coordinated communication systems. They appear to have established overlapping fields of fire from multiple elevated positions around the mining complex." The tactical situation crystallized in Sarah's mind with uncomfortable clarity. The SEALs were trapped in a location with minimal cover facing numerically superior forces that controlled every tactical advantage. Without immediate intervention, the outcome was predetermined. "Control, what's the timeline for conventional support?" "Nearest available assets are minimum 8 hours out due to weather conditions and geographical constraints. You are the only qualified operator within effective range." Sarah finished her equipment check and slung the Barrett rifle across her shoulder. The weight felt familiar, comfortable in a way that reminded her why she had once been considered among the Marine Corps' most capable snipers. Arthur stepped aside as she moved toward the door. "You sure about this?" "No, we saw," Sarah replied honestly. "But those men didn't choose to be in that situation. Someone else made that decision for them. Same as happened to me." She stepped into the February cold breath, immediately visible in air that carried the sharp bite of incoming weather. Visibility was deteriorating rapidly as snow clouds moved down from the higher elevations, which would complicate both her movement and target identification once she reached the valley. The hike to Devil's Backbone Valley would require 3 hours of steady movement across terrain that challenged even experienced mountain climbers. Sarah had made similar journeys during her exile, mapping every possible route for situations she had hoped would never materialize. Now that theoretical preparation was about to face practical application under conditions where failure meant death for 24 Americans. Art handed her David's compass, the brass instrument worn smooth by years of use in combat zones across 2 decades and 3 wars. "Bring yourself home, kid," he said quietly. "David would want you to come back." Sarah looked at the compass, feeling the weight of legacy and sacrifice that transcended her own troubled history. She thought about Art losing his son, about Marcus Rivers, who'd grown up without a father because Tom Rivers had taken bullets meant for Art 34 years ago, about all the promises made and kept and broken across generations of warriors who served and bled and died for reasons that sometimes made sense and sometimes didn't. "I'll bring them all home," Sarah said, "and then I'll come back. That's a promise." She started down the mountain trail, the Barrett rifle across her back and 47 rounds of match-grade ammunition that might be the difference between 24 families receiving their loved ones alive or receiving folded flags. Behind her, Art stood on the porch watching until she disappeared into the tree line. Then he walked inside, pulled out his old service radio, and began monitoring military frequencies. If Sarah was walking into hell, he'd be watching from the only place he could, listening, waiting, ready to call down whatever support he could find if things went wrong. Because that's what Rangers did. They never left anyone behind. Not in Kuwait, not in Somalia, not in Iraq, And not today in a forgotten Montana valley where the ghosts of old wars were about to meet the reality of new ones. The mountain wind carried snow and the distant sound of automatic weapons fire as Sarah moved through terrain she had mapped in solitude and was now crossing toward violence. 3 years of exile were ending. The ghost was going back to war. 6 miles northeast in the frozen heart of Devil's Backbone Valley, Lieutenant Commander Marcus Rivers pressed his back against the concrete wall of the mining complex main building, listening to automatic weapons fire that had continued almost without interruption for the past hour and 47 minutes. At 34, Marcus had led SEAL operations in 7 countries, but he had never faced a tactical situation that offered fewer viable options. Every principle of small unit tactics, every lesson learned through years of training and combat experience, pointed toward the same inevitable conclusion. They were going to die here. "Razor, this is Hammer." Chief Petty Officer Sam Clark's voice came through Marcus's earpiece with the calm professionalism that marked veteran operators even in the worst circumstances. "Alpha Team reports ammunition down to 60%. We've got wounded who need immediate medical attention." Marcus closed his eyes, running through possibilities that all led to the same endpoint. They were trapped in a location with minimal tactical advantages, facing an enemy that appeared to know exactly how American special operations units responded to coordinated attacks. "Hammer, consolidate Alpha Team with Bravo in Building 2. We need to reduce our defensive perimeter before they overrun individual positions." Through the shattered windows of the complex, Marcus could see muzzle flashes from at least 12 different elevated positions. The enemy had established interlocking fields of fire that made movement between buildings extremely hazardous, while maintaining coordinated pressure that prevented the SEALs from establishing effective counterfire positions. Petty Officer Owen Park, the team's medic, crouched beside 2 wounded SEALs in the corner of the room. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, applying pressure bandages to wounds that were bleeding faster than field medicine could address. "Razor, I need to get Anderson and Campbell to better cover. They're losing blood faster than I can replace it." Jake Anderson lay pale and still, his tactical vest dark with blood from shrapnel wounds across his chest and left arm. At 27, he'd survived operations in 4 combat theaters, but mountain warfare against professional opponents represented challenges that exceeded his previous experience in urban and desert environments. The tactical radio crackled with transmission from Firebase Echo, their supporting base of operations 40 miles southeast. "Viper 7, this is Echo Base. Situation report." Marcus grabbed the handset, knowing his response would likely be the last official communication these men would send. "Echo Base Viper 7, we are surrounded and heavily engaged by superior enemy forces. Estimated 150-plus hostiles with heavy weapons and coordinated tactics. Requesting immediate air support and extraction." Viper 7 negative on immediate air support. "Weather conditions prevent flight operations until dawn. You are on your own until morning." Dawn was still 5 hours away. Marcus looked around the room at men who had survived operations in some of the world's most dangerous locations. Warriors who had never faced a tactical situation this hopeless. They were running out of ammunition. Their wounded needed medical evacuation. And their defensive positions were being systematically eliminated by an enemy that seemed to anticipate every tactical decision they made. Petty Officer Ben Hughes, their communications specialist, looked up from his radio equipment with an expression that confirmed Marcus's worst fears. "Sir, I'm picking up enemy communications in English. Professional terminology, military protocols. These aren't just random fighters. They know exactly what they're doing." The implications hit Marcus immediately. Harrison Mansfield hadn't just prepared for the possibility of American military intervention. He had recruited personnel specifically capable of countering SEAL team tactics. This wasn't an ambush. It was a carefully orchestrated trap designed to eliminate an entire American Special Operations unit. Above the mining complex, Captain Peter Lockwood observed the engagement through military-grade binoculars from his position on Ridgeline Alpha. The former Marine Force reconnaissance officer had spent 18 months planning this operation, studying American Special Operations protocols and identifying weaknesses that could be exploited by a well-prepared defensive force. "All positions, this is Overwatch." Lockwood spoke into his tactical radio with the clipped efficiency of someone accustomed to command. "SEAL team is consolidating into Building 2. Adjust fire concentration accordingly." Lockwood had served alongside American Special Operations Forces for 6 years before discovering that patriotism paid significantly less than pragmatism. Harrison Mansfield offered compensation that made military service seem like volunteer work, along with operational freedom that allowed Lockwood to apply his tactical knowledge without political constraints or rules of engagement that favored enemy survival over mission completion. The mining complex below was illuminated by muzzle flashes from both sides, but the tactical mathematics were simple. American forces were depleting their ammunition reserves while defending static positions against mobile attackers who controlled every advantage. The outcome was predetermined unless something changed the fundamental equation. "Boss, this is position 3. The voice belonged to one of Lockwood's squad leaders, a former British SAS operator named Collins. "Americans are pulling back to secondary positions. Should we advance?" "Negative. Maintain current positions and continue coordinated fire. Let them exhaust their ammunition trying to defend positions that can't be held." Lockwood understood American military psychology better than the Americans themselves. SEAL teams were trained to never surrender, never retreat, never abandon wounded teammates. Those admirable qualities became tactical liabilities when facing an enemy willing to exploit them systematically. The snow was intensifying, reducing visibility and creating additional complications for both sides. But Lockwood's forces held every significant advantage, including detailed knowledge of terrain features that American intelligence hadn't identified. Victory was simply a matter of patience and professional execution. In the mining complex, Marcus made a decision that violated every principle of SEAL team tactics, but offered their only chance of survival. He keyed his radio for transmission on emergency frequencies monitored by all American military units in the region. Any station, this is SEAL Team 7. We are trapped in Devil's Backbone Valley and require immediate assistance from any available personnel. Grid coordinates follow." The transmission went out into the Montana wilderness, a desperate plea for help from operators who had never before found themselves in a situation where their training and equipment weren't sufficient to ensure mission success. Sarah heard that transmission through her portable radio as she navigated the treacherous approach to Devil's Backbone Valley. The desperation in Marcus's voice cut through 3 years of self-imposed isolation and reminded her why she had worn the uniform in the first place. She increased her pace, pushing through snow and across rocky terrain that demanded complete attention to avoid fatal mistakes. 24 men were counting on her skills whether they knew it or not. Behind her, the safety and isolation of 3 years disappeared into the mountain wilderness. Ahead waited a tactical challenge that would either prove her capabilities or provide the final chapter in a military career that had been interrupted by betrayal and political expedience. Sarah checked her watch and calculated time and distance remaining. 2 hours until she reached positions where her rifle could make a difference. The SEALs needed to survive that long. Her boots found purchase on ice-covered granite as she navigated a near-vertical section of ridgeline that most climbers would consider impassable in daylight, let alone during a snowstorm. Each handhold required testing before committing her full weight, while the Barrett rifle's additional bulk shifted her center of gravity in ways that demanded constant adjustment. One mistake would send her tumbling 300 feet down a rocky slope that offered no chance of survival. The temperature had dropped 15 degrees in the past hour, turning her breath into frozen crystals that clung to her tactical face mask. Visibility deteriorated with each passing minute as the storm intensified, but Sarah pressed forward using navigation skills learned during survival training that few Marines ever experienced. She had memorized this route during countless solo hiking expeditions, never imagining those peaceful explorations would become life-death reconnaissance for a combat mission. Her portable radio crackled with fragmentary transmissions from the valley below. American voices strained in desperate reporting ammunition counts that grew smaller with each update. The professional calm that marked experienced operators was beginning to crack under pressure that exceeded anything in their training or operational experience. "Bravo team, we need covering fire for casualty evacuation." The voice belonged to someone young, probably mid-20s, speaking with the controlled panic of a warrior facing his first encounter with mortality. Sarah increased her pace, ignoring the burning sensation in her lungs as thin mountain air challenged her cardiovascular system. Each step brought her closer to positions where her rifle could influence the engagement, but those same steps represented time that the trapped SEALs might not possess. In building 2 of the mining complex, Petty Officer Ian Palmer pressed his back against a concrete support pillar while automatic weapons fire shredded the air where his head had been moments earlier. At 23, Palmer was the newest member of SEAL Team 7 selected for this mission based on his exceptional marksmanship scores and demonstrated ability to maintain composure under extreme stress. Those qualifications felt inadequate now as he watched Owen Park struggling to treat Jake Anderson's wounds with limited medical supplies. "Fresh, can you get eyes on the machine gun position at 10 o'clock? Marcus's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question, but Palmer could detect underlying tension that acknowledged their deteriorating tactical situation. Palmer eased his rifle around the concrete pillar, using his scope to scan enemy positions that seemed to multiply with each observation. "I count 3 separate firing positions, all elevated, all with overlapping fields of fire. They've got us completely zeroed." The tactical implications were devastating. The enemy had established what military strategists called a kill zone in an area where every piece of cover could be engaged simultaneously from multiple directions. Moving between buildings meant exposure to coordinated fire that guaranteed casualties. Remaining in current positions meant slow elimination as ammunition supplies dwindled. Chief Sam Clark crawled across the debris-covered floor to Marcus's position, his movement timed to coincide with their own suppressive fire. Razor Charlie team reports they're down to 40 rounds per man. Delta team lost Rodriguez when they tried to establish overwatch on the eastern approach. Palmer felt his chest tighten at the mention of Rodriguez. 2 experienced operators gone in seconds, their tactical expertise neutralized by an enemy that seemed to anticipate every SEAL team doctrine. Sir Palmer said, his voice steady despite the fear that threatened to paralyze rational thinking. "What if we're not dealing with random fighters? What if someone planned this specifically to counter our tactics?" Marcus's expression confirmed what Palmer had begun to suspect. This wasn't an ambush. It was a carefully orchestrated trap designed by someone with intimate knowledge of American Special Operations procedures. Sarah reached a sheltered position behind a cluster of boulders approximately 2 miles from Devil's Backbone Valley. Wind velocity had increased significantly, creating conditions that would challenge even expert marksmen attempting long-range precision fire. She removed her rifle from its protective case and began systematic preparation for engagement at distances that pushed the boundaries of what was tactically possible. Scope calibration required mathematical calculations that accounted for altitude, atmospheric pressure, wind speed, and target movement. Each variable could mean the difference between eliminating a threat and revealing her position to enemy counter-snipers who would respond with overwhelming firepower. Her hands moved through familiar routines despite 3 years away from combat operations. Range estimation and wind assessment, breathing control exercises designed to slow her heart rate and eliminate tremor that could affect shot placement at extreme distances. "Control this as Phantom," she transmitted on the encrypted frequency. "Approaching overwatch positions. Request current intelligence on enemy disposition." Colonel Stone's voice carried strain that suggested the situation had deteriorated since their last communication. "Phantom SEAL team reports multiple casualties and ammunition critically low. Enemy forces appear to be coordinating from elevated positions around the entire complex." Sarah studied the valley through her spotting scope, identifying muzzle flashes and tactical positions that revealed enemy deployment patterns. Professional observation confirmed her worst suspicions. This wasn't random resistance, but coordinated defense executed by personnel with military training comparable to American Special Operations Forces. "Control, I'm observing approximately 20 separate firing positions, all elevated, all with clear sight lines to American positions. This is going to require sequential target elimination from multiple locations to avoid counter-sniper fire." "Understood, Phantom. SEAL Team Commander estimates 30 minutes before their position becomes untenable. 30 minutes to eliminate enough threats to change the tactical balance in favor of 24 trapped Americans." Sarah had achieved difficult shots under challenging conditions, but never with time constraints that meant failure would result in the systematic execution of an entire SEAL team. She began calculating approach routes to firing positions that would provide clear sight lines while offering concealment from enemy observation. The storm was both advantage and obstacle. Reduced visibility would hide her movement, but complicate target identification at the extreme ranges necessary to remain outside enemy response capabilities. In the mining complex, Marcus made the announcement that every operator had been dreading. All teams prepare for coordinated breakout attempt. We cannot maintain these positions with current ammunition supplies. Palmer looked at Jake Anderson, whose wounds were beyond Owen's ability to treat with available medical supplies. What about the wounded? We carry them, Marcus replied, with the absolute certainty that marked leaders who had never abandoned teammates regardless of tactical cost. Nobody gets left behind. The radio crackled with enemy transmissions in English, confirming Palmer's suspicion that they were facing former military personnel who understood American tactical psychology. Voices discussed American positions, ammunition estimates, and casualty counts with the professional detachment of experienced operators conducting systematic elimination of enemy forces. Palmer checked his ammunition count, 18 rounds remaining in a firefight that had already consumed more ordnance than most SEAL operations expended during entire deployments. Around him, teammates who had survived operations in 7 countries prepared for a desperate attempt to break through coordinated defensive positions that offered minimal chance of success. "Fresh, you ready for this?" Chief Clark asked, his voice carrying the calm acceptance of a warrior who had always known his profession might require the ultimate sacrifice. Palmer looked around the room at men who had become his brothers through shared danger and mutual dependence. Jake Anderson, bleeding but still gripping his rifle with determination that refused to acknowledge defeat. Owen Park continuing to treat wounded, despite exposure to enemy fire that could eliminate him at any moment. Marcus calculating tactical possibilities that all led to the same probable outcome. Ready, Chief? They were professional warriors trained to accomplish impossible missions through superior skills, equipment, and determination. But they were also human beings facing an enemy that had neutralized every advantage through superior preparation and tactical positioning. Above them, Sarah moved through mountain terrain toward positions where her rifle might provide the only chance these men had of surviving the next hour. 2 miles of treacherous approach remained between her current location and effective firing positions. Time was running out for 24 Americans who had never asked to be in this situation, never chosen to face an enemy that had been specifically prepared to counter their capabilities. Sarah increased her pace, pushing through snow and across ice-covered rocks that demanded perfect balance while carrying an equipment that could save lives if she reached the right position in time. Behind her, 3 years of safe isolation disappeared into the Montana wilderness. Ahead waited the most challenging tactical situation she had ever faced against an enemy that had been prepared specifically to eliminate American special operations capabilities. The storm was worsening, visibility was deteriorating, and 24 men were counting on skills she hadn't used since the mission that had destroyed her military career. Sarah settled into a prone firing position on Eagle's Perch overlook. Her body formed perfect alignment behind the Barrett M82A1 as muscle memory overrode 3 years of civilian existence. Wind velocity measured 12 miles per hour from the northwest, requiring compensation calculations that had become instinctive during her 8 years as a Marine Scout sniper. Through her scope, the mining complex appeared as a tactical chessboard where American warriors were being systematically eliminated by an enemy that controlled every advantage. Her breathing slowed to the controlled rhythm that preceded precision shots at extreme range. Heart rate decreased as combat focus eliminated all awareness except the crosshair's target and mathematical relationship between bullet trajectory and terminal ballistics. The familiar weight of the rifle felt like greeting an old partner after an unwanted separation. Range to primary target, 1,847 meters. Atmospheric conditions challenging but manageable. Wind compensation, 3/4 value left. Target assessment, enemy machine gun position on Ridgeline Alpha, currently engaging American forces with devastating effect. Sarah's finger found the trigger with gentle pressure that had been perfected through thousands of practice rounds and dozens of confirmed kills in 7 countries. The mathematics were complex, but the execution had to be flawless. One shot to announce her presence and change the tactical equation. Miss in her position would be compromised without achieving any tactical advantage. In the mining complex below, Marcus raised his hand to signal the coordinated breakout attempt that represented their only remaining chance of survival. Around him, 17 remaining SEALs prepared for movement that would expose them to coordinated fire from multiple directions. The wounded would be carried, equipment would be abandoned, and survival would depend on speed, surprise, and the desperate courage of warriors who had never learned how to surrender. "On my mark," Marcus whispered into his tactical radio. "Alpha Team breaks north toward the equipment yard. Bravo Team provides covering fire, then follows 30 seconds behind. Charlie Team maintains overwatch until both elements reach secondary positions." Petty Officer Tony Williams, the team's explosives expert, crouched near the eastern window with demolition charges that could eliminate the building's structural supports if enemy forces attempted to storm their position. At 31, Williams had served with SEAL teams for 9 years, participating in operations that officially never happened in countries the Pentagon preferred not to acknowledge publicly. "Razor, those machine gun positions are going to chew us apart the moment we break cover," Williams said, his voice carrying the calm assessment of someone who understood that professional evaluation of hopeless situations was preferable to false optimism. Marcus nodded, knowing Williams's tactical analysis was accurate but irrelevant. Remaining in current positions guaranteed slow elimination as ammunition supplies reached zero. Movement offered minimal chance of success, but minimal was preferable to none. Above the complex, Sarah's crosshairs settled on the enemy machine gunner, who had been systematically suppressing American attempts to establish effective return fire. Professional observation revealed disciplined fire control, coordinated communication with other positions, and tactical knowledge that marked former military training. This wasn't random resistance. It was coordinated elimination of American special operations capabilities by personnel with equivalent professional expertise. Time slowed as Sarah's finger applied final pressure to the trigger. 3 years of exile, disgrace, and self-doubt focused into a single moment that would determine whether 24 Americans lived or died in the next hour. The Barrett Rifles report echoed across Devil's Backbone Valley like thunder. The 50 caliber round traversed nearly 2 kilometers of mountain air before finding its target with terminal precision that ended the machine gun's devastating effectiveness instantly. Through her scope, Sarah observed the immediate tactical impact. Enemy communications increased in volume and urgency as professional fighters responded to unexpected threat from an impossible direction. Muzzle flashes shifted orientation as multiple positions attempted to locate and eliminate the sniper, who had just changed the fundamental equation of their carefully orchestrated trap. "Control this as Phantom," Sarah transmitted while rapidly changing position to avoid counter-sniper fire. "First target eliminated. SEAL team should execute movement now, while enemy forces are adjusting to new threat parameters." In the mining complex, Marcus had witnessed the impossible shot that eliminated their most dangerous immediate threat. Experienced operators didn't believe in miracles, but they recognized tactical opportunities when superior firepower provided temporary advantage. "All teams execute breakout now," Marcus commanded, rising from cover and leading Alpha Team toward the equipment yard in a desperate sprint that exposed them to fire from multiple directions. Chief Sam Clark coordinated covering fire from Bravo Team, his M4 rifle engaging enemy positions with suppressive fire designed to disrupt aim rather than achieve specific kills. At 36, Clark had served as Marcus's senior enlisted advisor for 4 years, developing the tactical partnership that allowed SEAL team operations to succeed despite impossible odds and insufficient support. "Bravo Team covering fire on Ridgeline Charlie," Clark shouted over the deafening noise of coordinated weapons discharge. "Keep their heads down until Alpha reaches secondary positions." Petty Officer Ben Hughes shouldered his radio equipment while providing covering fire his communications gear, representing the only link between the trapped SEALs and outside support that remained hours away. The radio weighed 37 pounds, making movement difficult, but Hughes understood that losing communication capability meant losing any chance of coordinated extraction. Behind them, Owen Park and Ian Palmer carried Jake Anderson, whose shrapnel wounds required immediate medical attention that wouldn't be available until they reached safety. Anderson remained conscious despite blood loss, his rifle ready for engagement, even while being evacuated by teammates who refused to abandon wounded personnel regardless of tactical cost. "Almost there," Owen called to Jake as they crossed open ground under fire that seemed to come from every direction simultaneously. "Just hold on." Sarah observed the coordinated movement through her scope while calculating her next target priority. The SEAL team's breakout had created temporary tactical confusion among enemy forces, but professional fighters would adapt quickly. Her intervention had provided opportunity, not victory. Additional precision fire would be required to maintain the advantage long enough for American forces to reach defensible positions. Target selection required instant tactical assessment. Ridgeline Bravo held sniper positions that could eliminate the moving SEALs with precision fire. Building elimination took priority over personnel elimination when time constraints demanded maximum tactical impact with minimum ammunition expenditure. Range to secondary target, 2,134 meters. Wind compensation increasing due to storm intensification. Target type structural support for enemy observation platform. The second shot from Sarah's Barrett rifle eliminated the wooden platform that had provided elevated firing position for enemy snipers, sending 2 hostile personnel tumbling 40 feet down a rocky slope while temporarily disrupting coordinated fire from that direction. Captain Peter Lockwood monitored the tactical situation from his command position with growing concern that approached professional alarm. 2 precision shots from impossible range, each eliminating key tactical positions, suggested the presence of an expert marksman operating from concealed positions that his reconnaissance hadn't identified. All positions report status and maintain fire discipline, Lockwood commanded through his tactical radio. We have sniper contact from elevated position bearing unknown. Adjust defensive postures accordingly. The professional concern in Lockwood's voice reflected 18 months of planning that hadn't anticipated intervention by personnel who weren't supposed to exist in this operational area. His intelligence had accounted for every available American military asset within 300 miles. The sniper engaging his forces represented an unknown variable that could compromise the entire operation. Position 5 reports sniper elimination of Overwatch platform, came the voice of one of his team leaders. Precision fire from extreme range. Professional execution. This is not random civilian interference. Lockwood's tactical display showed SEAL team movement towards secondary positions, while his own forces struggled to maintain coordinated fire under harassment from an invisible marksman whose capabilities matched or exceeded his own personnel. The tactical mathematics that had guaranteed American elimination were shifting in favor of the trapped forces. All sniper teams locate and eliminate hostile marksmen immediately. This is priority target, all other missions secondary. But Sarah had already vacated her first firing position, moving through terrain that offered concealment while maintaining observation of the tactical situation below. Professional sniper doctrine emphasized mobility after engagement, never firing multiple shots from the same location when facing competent opposition capable of coordinated counterfire. Her tactical radio crackled with transmission from Marcus's team as they established temporary positions in the mining complex equipment yard. Unknown friendly sniper, this is SEAL Team 7. Outstanding shooting. Can you provide continued support while we consolidate positions? Sarah keyed her microphone while navigating rocky terrain toward her secondary firing location. SEAL 7, this is Phantom. Continuing overwatch and target engagement. Suggest you prepare for coordinated assault once enemy forces adapt to current tactical situation. Copy Phantom. We owe you our lives. Professional warriors didn't express gratitude during active combat operations, but Marcus's brief acknowledgement carried weight that reflected desperate circumstances and unexpected salvation. The SEAL team had been minutes away from systematic elimination when Sarah's intervention had provided tactical breathing room that might extend their survival. But survival and victory remained 2 different objectives. Enemy forces still maintained numerical superiority, tactical positioning, and coordinated capability that could overwhelm American positions once they adapted to the presence of hostile sniper fire. Sarah reached her secondary position and began target assessment for her 3rd shot. Mathematical calculations revealed wind speed increasing visibility, in deteriorating, and range extending beyond optimal parameters for guaranteed accuracy. But precision remained preferable to volume when ammunition supplies were limited and target selection could determine the outcome of an engagement involving 24 American lives. Through her scope, she observed enemy forces adjusting their tactical disposition in response to sniper harassment. Professional fighters adapting to unexpected threats, maintaining fire discipline, while attempting to locate and eliminate the marksmen who had disrupted their carefully orchestrated trap. Time remained the critical factor. Dawn was still 4 hours away. Conventional support remained unavailable. and the tactical situation would continue evolving as both sides adapted to changing circumstances that neither had anticipated when the engagement began. Sarah settled into position for her third shot, knowing that each subsequent engagement would increase the probability of her position being detected and eliminated by enemy counterfire. Below in the valley, 24 American warriors continued their desperate fight for survival against an enemy that had been specifically prepared to eliminate their capabilities through superior positioning and coordinated tactics. But the tactical equation had changed. The hunter had become the hunted. And professional fighters on both sides would need to adapt quickly to new circumstances that neither had anticipated when this deadly game began. The ghost had returned to the mountain, and she was hunting. Sarah's breath formed ice crystals on the inside of her scope as she tracked movement among enemy positions through deteriorating visibility. The storm had intensified beyond weather service predictions, creating whiteout conditions that challenged even thermal imaging equipment. But professional snipers learned to exploit environmental factors that hindered others, turning obstacles into tactical advantages through superior preparation and adaptability. Her third target presented complex challenges that pushed the boundaries of what was mathematically possible. Range 2,387 meters through swirling snow and crosswinds that varied by altitude and terrain features. The target, an enemy forward observer directing coordinated fire against SEAL positions, occupied a rocky outcropping that offered minimal exposure and excellent concealment. Through her scope, Sarah observed the observer's disciplined movement patterns as he coordinated multiple firing positions through tactical radio communications. Professional behavior that marked former military training, probably European special forces, based on equipment configuration and tactical methodology. Harrison Mansfield had recruited serious personnel for this operation, not random mercenaries seeking easy money. "Control this as Phantom," Sarah transmitted while calculating bullet drop compensation for extreme range engagement. "Enemy forces are conducting coordinated fire direction from elevated observation posts. Eliminating forward observers should disrupt their tactical coordination significantly." Ishtar's Colonel Stone's response carried strain that suggested the situation extended beyond the immediate engagement. "Phantom, be advised that intercepted communications indicate enemy forces have additional personnel en route to your location. Estimated 20 to 30 additional hostiles with vehicle support." The implications crystallized in Sarah's tactical assessment. Harrison Mansfield hadn't established a temporary arms dealing transaction in Devil's Backbone Valley. He had created a permanent operational base designed to conduct ongoing illegal activities while maintaining capability to eliminate American military interference. The SEAL team hadn't walked into an ambush. They had discovered a strategic threat that required immediate neutralization. Below in the mining complex equipment yard, Chief Sam Clark coordinated defensive positions, while Owen Park worked frantically to treat wounded personnel with medical supplies that wouldn't last another hour. The tactical breathing room provided by sniper support had allowed consolidation, but their fundamental problems remained unchanged. Insufficient ammunition, multiple casualties requiring evacuation, and enemy forces that still maintained numerical and positional advantages. "Lifeline, how's Anderson holding up?" Clark asked, his voice carrying the concern that senior NCOs learned to mask but never eliminate when teammates faced life-threatening injuries. Owen looked up from field dressing that was already saturated with blood despite his best efforts to control hemorrhaging from shrapnel wounds. "He needs surgical intervention within 2 hours, Chief. I can keep him stable, but these injuries are beyond field treatment capabilities." Jake Anderson remained conscious but increasingly pale as blood loss accumulated despite Owen's medical expertise. At 27, Anderson had survived at operations in 4 combat theaters, but mountain warfare against professional opponents represented challenges that exceeded previous experience in urban and desert environments. "Don't worry about me, Chief," Jake managed, his voice steady despite obvious pain. "Just keep the team moving. I can still shoot if you need covering fire." Clark nodded with the mixture of pride and concern that marked leaders who understood that warrior spirit could overcome physical limitations but couldn't change medical reality. Jake's determination was admirable and tactically valuable, but his deteriorating condition would eventually require evacuation that might compromise the entire team's survival. Lieutenant Commander Marcus established communication with remaining squad leaders to assess tactical capabilities after their desperate movement to secondary positions. Alpha Team report status. Alpha Team operational with 14 personnel, came the response from Petty Officer Fisher. Ammunition approximately 50%. No additional casualties during movement. Current position provides improved cover, but limited fields of fire. Bravo Team report. Petty Officer Reed's voice reflected the controlled exhaustion of warriors who had been engaged continuously for over 2 hours. Bravo Team operational with 10 personnel. We lost Castellano during the breakout. RPG took out his position while he was providing covering fire for wounded evacuation. Marcus closed his eyes, briefly processing the loss of another experienced operator whose tactical expertise and personal friendship couldn't be replaced by determination or superior equipment. Tony Castellano had been the team's secondary explosive specialist, a 30-year-old veteran whose knowledge of demolitions had saved lives during operations in 7 countries. But professional commanders didn't have time for grief during active combat operations. Tactical assessment required immediate attention to current capabilities rather than dwelling on irreplaceable losses that couldn't be changed through emotional responses. Copy Bravo, Charlie Team status. The response came from Petty Officer Fletcher, whose voice carried the steady professionalism that marked veterans who had learned to function effectively despite circumstances that would paralyze civilians. Charlie Team operational with 7 personnel. Ammunition critically low, maybe 20 minutes of coordinated fire before we're down to sidearms. 20 minutes. Marcus calculated tactical possibilities that all led to the same conclusion. Without resupply or extraction, SEAL Team 7 would be eliminated through systematic attrition that their enemy could sustain indefinitely. But the unknown sniper callsign Phantom had already demonstrated capabilities that could change tactical equations through precision elimination of key targets. Professional warriors adapted to changing circumstances rather than accepting defeat based on initial assessments that might no longer reflect current reality. Above the valley, Sarah completed her mathematical calculations and settled into the controlled breathing rhythm that preceded precision shots at ranges that challenged both equipment and operator capabilities. Wind compensation required constant adjustment as storm conditions created microclimates that varied by altitude and terrain features. One mistake would waste ammunition that couldn't be replaced and reveal her position to enemy counter-sniper teams that possessed equivalent professional training. Her finger applied gradual pressure to the trigger while her crosshairs tracked the enemy observer's minimal exposure during radio transmission. Professional snipers learned that target availability measured in seconds rather than minutes, requiring instant decision-making that couldn't accommodate hesitation or second-guessing. The Barrett rifle's thunderous report echoed across the valley as the 50 caliber round traversed over 2 kilometers of turbulent air before eliminating the forward observer, whose coordination had been directing devastating fire against American positions. Through her scope, Sarah observed immediate tactical impact as enemy communications became fragmented and multiple firing positions lost their coordinated effectiveness. SEAL 7, this is Phantom, Sarah transmitted while rapidly changing position to avoid counterfire. Forward observer eliminated. Enemy coordination should be disrupted for several minutes while they establish alternate command structure. Marcus's response reflected the professional gratitude of someone who understood that tactical breathing room measured in minutes could determine survival or elimination for his entire team. Outstanding work, Phantom. Can you provide continued support while we attempt to improve our tactical position? Affirmative, SEAL 7, but be advised that enemy forces are adapting quickly to sniper harassment. Window of opportunity may be limited. Captain Peter Lockwood monitored fragmentary radio transmissions from his scattered forces with growing concern that approached tactical alarm. 3 precision eliminations from extreme range had disrupted carefully coordinated fire plans that had required weeks of preparation and reconnaissance. The unknown sniper possessed capabilities that matched his best personnel while operating from positions that remained undetected despite concentrated counter-sniper efforts. All positions report contact with hostile marksmen. Lockwood commanded through encrypted communications that he hoped to remain secure from American interception. Position 2 reports no visual contact despite intensive observation of probable firing locations. Came the response from one of his team leaders, a former British SAS operator named Collins. Position 4 maintains overwatch of eastern approaches, but has observed no muzzle flash or movement that would indicate sniper location. reported another voice marking a German GSG-9 specialist whose precision marksmanship had been rendered ineffective by an enemy that remained invisible despite devastating impact on friendly forces. Lockwood's tactical assessment suggested the hostile sniper possessed mountain warfare experience that exceeded his personnel's capabilities in this specific operational environment. Professional adaptation required immediate changes to tactical disposition that accounted for ongoing harassment from an invisible enemy whose effectiveness had already changed the fundamental equation of their carefully planned operation. All sniper teams expand search parameters to include extreme range positions beyond 2 kilometers. This operator possesses professional capabilities and will continue mobile operations to avoid counterfire. But Sarah had already relocated to tertiary positions that offered concealment while maintaining observation of tactical developments below. Professional snipers understood that mobility represented survival, particularly when facing competent opposition capable of coordinated counter-sniper operations. Her fourth shot would require even greater precision as enemy forces adapted their positioning to minimize exposure while maintaining coordinated pressure against American positions. Target selection demanded tactical assessment that prioritized maximum impact with minimum ammunition expenditure since resupply remained impossible, and every round had to contribute to SEAL team survival. Through her scope, Sarah identified ammunition resupply personnel moving between enemy positions under cover that they believed provided concealment from ground-level observation. But elevated positioning offered sight lines that revealed movement patterns invisible to personnel operating at valley floor level. Range 1,923 meters. Target enemy logistics coordinator carrying ammunition boxes that would sustain continued engagement against American forces. Elimination would create supply problems that might force enemy tactical adjustment, favoring SEAL team survival. The fourth shot from Sarah's Barrett rifle eliminated key resupply personnel while destroying ammunition boxes that contained ordnance necessary for sustained operations against entrenched American forces. Secondary explosions from eliminated ammunition created tactical confusion among nearby enemy positions, while reducing their capability to maintain coordinated fire. But Sarah wasn't alone on these ridgelines. From a position 1,200 meters to her northeast, Dmitry Volkov tracked her movement through his scope. The 42-year-old Russian had been hunting Western snipers since Chechnya in '99. 47 confirmed kills, most of them NATO-trained. This American woman was different. Mobile, disciplined, deadly accurate at ranges that challenged belief. Volkov's radio crackled. Lockwood's voice, "Position 6, do you have eyes on the hostile sniper?" "Dayo," Volkov replied in accented English. "Female, very skilled. I have shot. Take it." Volkov's crosshair settled on Sarah's position as she prepared her fifth shot. 850 meters, moderate wind, clear sight picture. Then his satellite phone vibrated. A text from Moscow, his daughter's doctor. He glanced at the screen. "Katya's condition worsening, leukemia progressing. Treatment requires $200,000 USD within 2 weeks, or we move to palliative care." "I'm sorry, Dmitry." Volkov's hands shook. Katya was 14, his only child. His reason for taking contracts that paid enough to afford experimental treatments Russian insurance wouldn't cover. His finger rested on the trigger. One shot, $50,000 bonus from Mansfield, 1/4 of what Katya needed. Through his scope, he watched the American woman. She was speaking into her radio, laughing softly at something. Human, not just a target. His phone buzzed again. Video call from Moscow. He accepted. Katya's pale face filled the screen. Bald from chemotherapy, smiling despite everything. "Papa, are you working? Da Solnishko. Little son. Papa is working. When you coming home, I miss you." Volkov's throat tightened. "Soon, Dorogaya. Very soon." "Papa, if treatment doesn't work, will you be sad?" He couldn't speak, could only nod. "Don't be sad, Papa. Your best papa in world. I love you." The call ended. Volkov looked back through his scope. The American sniper was repositioning. Still talking on her radio. Still human. Still someone's daughter. His radio crackled. "Position 6, take the shot." Volkov's crosshair tracked her center mass. His training said shoot. His contract said shoot. Katya's medical bills said shoot. But Katya's voice echoed, "Your best papa in world." What kind of papa kills mother, daughters, for money? The American woman paused, looked toward the valley where her countrymen were fighting. Then she raised her rifle toward another target. Volkov made his decision. He shifted his aim 30 centimeters left, fired. The bullet struck the rock face beside Sarah's head, missing by inches. Deliberate. A warning. She dropped flat, rolled, scrambled behind cover. Volkov keyed his radio. Target displaced, lost sight picture, repositioning. Lockwood's frustrated response crackled back, "Find her." But Volkov was already moving, away from Sarah's position, away from this contract, away from blood money that would save his daughter by making someone else's child fatherless. Sarah caught her breath behind a boulder, adrenaline spiking. That shot had been close, professional close. She scanned the ridge where it originated, saw a figure in winter camouflage climbing away from the fight. Not pursuing, withdrawing. Her scope found him. 800 meters, clear shot. He was exposed vulnerable. Her finger touched the trigger. Then she saw him stop, pull out a phone, stare at the screen for a long moment. Saw his shoulders shake, crying perhaps before he put it away and continued climbing. Something in that gesture stopped her. This was a soldier. Like her. Fighting for reasons that probably weren't as simple as greed. She shifted aim, fired. The bullet destroyed his radio antenna. Not him, his equipment. Volkov spun, located her position. For 3 seconds, two snipers stared at each other across 800 meters of mountain air. Then Volkov did something unexpected. He saluted. Sarah hesitated, then returned it. Volkov turned and disappeared into the storm. Lockwood's voice erupted on the radio. All positions, hostile snipers still active, whereas position 6, static. Sarah keyed her mic to Marcus. "Seal 7, you've got about 5 minutes before they reorganize. Move now." Above them, Sarah observed enemy forces adapting to her harassment through tactical adjustments that would require corresponding changes to her own operational methodology. Professional opponents learning from contact, improving their defensive posture, beginning coordinated counter-sniper operations designed to locate and eliminate her capabilities. The tactical situation was evolving rapidly as both sides adapted to changing circumstances that neither had anticipated when the engagement began. Then she heard it, a voice on the enemy communications channel that made her blood run cold. "All units, this is Lockwood. I know you're out there, Sarah. I trained you. I know every position you'd choose, every tactic you'd employ. You can't hide from me." Peter Lockwood, her former mentor, the man who had destroyed her career. And now he was hunting her with the same methods he had taught her years ago. Sarah's jaw tightened. Lockwood knew her patterns, her preferences, her instincts. He would anticipate her next moves. But 3 years in these mountains had taught her things that Lockwood's textbook tactics couldn't predict. Local knowledge, terrain features that existed on no map, and something Lockwood had never possessed: the willingness to take risks that defied conventional doctrine when lives depended on it. "Control, this is Phantom," Sarah transmitted. "Be advised, enemy commander has identified me. Expect intensified counter-sniper operations." Stone's response carried new urgency. "Phantom, additional intelligence. Mansfield's transaction isn't just weapons. Stolen U.S. military access codes. If those codes reach buyers, our entire Middle East operations network is compromised. SEAL team must secure hard drives in the admin building. Codes are encrypted, but time-sensitive." The mission parameters had just expanded. Sarah couldn't simply provide covering fire. She needed to enable a SEAL infiltration of the command center against an enemy now fully aware of her presence and actively hunting her position. Her fifth shot needed to create maximum chaos while she repositioned for what would likely become a direct confrontation with counter-sniper teams that included Lockwood himself. Target selection, enemy communications specialist coordinating the counter-sniper hunt from an exposed position on Ridgeline Delta. Range 2,156 meters, wind gusting to 22 miles per hour. Visibility dropping below 50 meters in snow squalls. Sarah's breathing slowed. Heart rate dropped to 44 beats per minute. The world narrowed to crosshairs wind drift calculations in the certainty that this shot would paint a target on her back. The Barrett fired. The communications specialist dropped. And immediately Sarah was moving because she knew what came next. Incoming fire began impacting around her previous position within seconds. Professional counter-snipers had triangulated her muzzle flash. At least 3 separate firing positions coordinated methodical. These weren't amateurs. Sarah scrambled across ice-covered rocks, the Barrett's weight threatening to throw her off balance with each movement. Bullets cracked past her head, fragmenting granite into deadly shrapnel. She dove behind a boulder formation as a .50 caliber round punched through the space her torso had occupied a heartbeat earlier. Someone very good was shooting at her now. She keyed her radio while catching her breath. SEAL 7 Phantom. Enemy coordination disrupted, but I'm taking effective counterfire. Execute your assault on admin building now while they're focused on me. Marcus didn't hesitate. All teams were moving. Phantom's buying us time. Don't waste it. Through a gap in the rocks, Sarah saw the SEALs beginning their advance. Tony Williams led the way, placing shaped charges on the admin building's reinforced door. The rest of the team provided covering fire, their ammunition expenditure unsustainable but necessary. Then she saw him. On the opposite ridge, maybe 400 meters away, a figure in winter camouflage carrying a rifle she recognized even at this distance. Custom-built Accuracy International, the same model Lockwood had carried when he'd trained her. He was looking directly at her position. Sarah's radio crackled with his voice transmitted on a frequency he knew she'd be monitoring. "Hello, Sarah. Been a long time. You've gotten better, but so have I. And I know something you don't." A cold dread settled in her stomach. Lockwood always had contingencies, always had leverage. "Your old man Martinez, my team has him. Took some work to find his cabin, but we got there. He's alive for now. Surrender and he stays that way. Keep fighting and he dies. You've got 5 minutes to decide." Sarah's world stopped. Art. They had Art. Her hands trembled on the rifle. Everything she'd done, every shot she'd taken had been to protect people, to redeem herself. And now the man who'd saved her life, who'd become the father she needed, was being used against her. Stone's voice cut through her paralysis. "Phantom negative on that intel. We have satellite confirmation. Martinez is alive and secure. Lockwood is lying. It's a psychological operation. Stay focused." But doubt gnawed at Sarah's mind. What if Stone was wrong? What if Art was in danger because of her? Then Art's voice came through her radio, weak but unmistakable. "Sarah, kid, I'm okay. Killed 3 of their boys when they tried to breach my cabin. I'm locked in my basement with enough ammunition to hold until spring. Don't you dare surrender. You finish this. That's an order, Marine." Relief and determination flooded through Sarah in equal measure. Art was alive, fighting, and she had a job to do. "Copy that, Ghost," she transmitted back, finishing the mission. She turned her scope back to Lockwood's position, but he'd already moved. Professional instincts had told him his psychological gambit had failed. Now it would come down to skill versus skill, student versus teacher, in a duel that would determine the fate of 24 Americans and an intelligence breakthrough worth millions. Below, Tony's charges detonated. The admin building's door blew inward. SEALs poured through the breach, engaging in close-quarters combat against defenders who'd had no warning of the assault. Sarah needed to keep the enemy leadership focused on her, not on the SEALs breaching their command center. She relocated again this time to a position she'd scouted months ago during a solo climb. A narrow ledge behind a waterfall frozen now into sheets of ice. The water's flow created a natural thermal barrier that would mask her heat signature from infrared scopes. Lockwood had taught her to think about thermal masking, but he'd never operated in terrain like this. From this position, she had a clear view of the valley's eastern approach, where she could see vehicle headlights in the distance. The reinforcements Stone had warned about. Maybe 20 minutes out. Sarah made a decision. She had 12 rounds left, enough for what needed to be done if she made every shot count. Shot 6 enemy sniper on Ridgeline Charlie, currently providing overwatch for the admin building. Range 1,847 meters. The sniper dropped before his spotter could identify the source. Shot 7 RPG teams setting up to fire on the admin building where Marcus's team was fighting. Range 1,634 meters. Both the gunner and loader eliminated in a 2-second double tap that drew gasps from the SEALs inside who saw it happen. Shot 8, the communications hub antenna on the command building. Not a person, but a target that would isolate Mansfield's forces from their incoming reinforcements. Range 2,012 meters through the worst wind yet. The antenna shattered and enemy radio chatter descended into chaos. Inside the admin building, Marcus's team was fighting through corridors slick with blood and cordite smoke. Ben Hughes reached the war room first, his weapon sweeping corners with practiced efficiency. Hard drives located, he called out. 3 units, heavy encryption, but intact. Secure them, Marcus ordered. We're leaving in 2 minutes whether this building is clear or not. But they weren't alone in the building. From a reinforced inner office, Harrison Mansfield and Peter Lockwood made their stand with a dozen remaining mercenaries. The hallway between the SEALs and their target became a kill box, each side unable to advance without catastrophic casualties. That's when Jake Anderson, barely conscious and against every order Owen had given him, pulled himself to his feet. The young SEAL had injected himself with the last of Owen's combat stimulants, chemical courage that would either save his brothers or kill him in the attempt. "Jake, no!" Owen shouted, but Anderson was already moving. The kid charged down that hallway with his rifle blazing, drawing fire from every mercenary position. It was suicide. It was also the distraction Marcus needed. Tony Williams threw flashbangs. Ian Palmer and Chief Clark flanked right. Marcus went left. And in the chaos, with Jake Anderson taking 7 bullets, but staying on his feet through sheer chemical determination, the SEALs overwhelmed the defensive position. Mansfield tried to run. Marcus tackled him. Lockwood raised his weapon toward Marcus's back, and Sarah, from her impossible position behind the frozen waterfall, took her 9th shot, 1,640 meters, through falling snow, at a target partially obscured by interior walls. It should have been impossible. The .50 caliber round punched through the building's exterior wall, through an interior partition, and caught Peter Lockwood in the right shoulder, spinning him around and sending his weapon clattering across the floor. Not a kill shot. Sarah could have killed him, but she chose not to, because unlike Lockwood, she still believed in justice over revenge. Marcus zip-tied both Mansfield and Lockwood while Owen Park desperately worked to stabilize Jake Anderson, who had finally collapsed, his body shutting down from blood loss and cardiac strain. "We need immediate dust-off," Owen shouted into his radio. "Critical casualty, maybe 5 minutes before we lose him." Stone's voice came back. "Extraction birds inbound, ETA 12 minutes. Weather's clearing enough for flight ops." 12 minutes. Jake might not have 12 minutes. Sarah was already moving down the mountain, abandoning stealth for speed. She'd seen Art perform field surgery in his cabin years ago. She'd assisted. And if she could reach that SEAL team before Jake's heart stopped for good, maybe she could do something. She covered 2 miles in 18 minutes, a pace that should have been impossible with her gear. When she burst into the admin building, Owen looked up from Jake's body with desperate, grateful eyes. "You know field cardiac procedure?" he asked. "Ranger trained me," Sarah replied, dropping to her knees beside Jake. "What do you need?" For the next 8 minutes, Sarah and Owen worked in perfect synchronization, performing emergency medical procedures that pushed the boundaries of field medicine. Manual chest compressions, emergency medications that most combat medics never had to use, and a technique Art had learned in Somalia, a direct cardiac injection that was either going to restart Jake's heart or kill him. Jake's eyes fluttered open just as the extraction helicopters touched down outside. "Did we get them?" he whispered. "We got them," Marcus said, gripping Jake's hand. "And you're going home to Katie and those kids. That's a promise." As the wounded were loaded onto helicopters and Mansfield and Lockwood were taken into custody, Marcus approached Sarah. She was sitting against a wall, exhausted, her rifle across her lap, watching the organized chaos of a successful extraction. "Ma'am, I don't know how to thank you," Marcus began. "Thank my neighbor," Sarah said. "Art Martinez. He served with your father in Desert Storm. Your dad saved his life in Kuwait City. Art made me a promise to watch over you. I just helped him keep it." Marcus's eyes widened with recognition and something deeper, connection across generations. The invisible threads that bound warriors together across decades and battles. "Tom Rivers was my father," Marcus said quietly. "I never got to know him. He died when I was 3. But Art sent me letters every year on my birthday, told me stories about my dad. I always wondered why." "Because that's what Rangers do," Sarah said. "They never leave anyone behind, not in combat, not in memory, not ever." Colonel Stone's voice came through on Sarah's radio. Phantom, outstanding work. Intelligence assessment confirms the hard drives contain access codes for multiple classified networks. This operation prevented a catastrophic security breach. Full mission debrief in 72 hours. And Sarah, welcome back. But Sarah wasn't listening to Stone anymore. She was looking at the mountains, thinking about art, about redemption, about second chances. 3 months later, Sarah stood at a podium at the Pentagon wearing her dress blues for the first time in 3 years. The Secretary of Defense pinned the Medal of Honor to her uniform, while Art Martinez, his arm in a sling from the gunshot wound he'd received defending his cabin, watched with pride that transcended words. For extraordinary heroism and technical skill beyond measure, the citation read, Gunnery Sergeant Sarah Morgan's actions directly resulted in the preservation of 24 American lives and the prevention of a strategic intelligence compromise. 42 shots fired, 38 enemy combatants eliminated, 73 minutes of sustained precision fire under extreme environmental conditions, a record that will stand for generations. After the ceremony, Stone approached Sarah with an offer. Joint Counterterrorism Task Force, training position. We need someone who can teach the next generation what you demonstrated in those mountains. Sarah looked at the medal in her hands, then at Art, then back at Stone. I'll think about it, Colonel, but first I need to go home. I've got a cabin that needs repairs, a mountain that needs protecting, and an old ranger who needs someone to drink coffee with at dawn. 6 months later, Sarah was teaching advanced sniper tactics at Fort Bragg. 12 students, 4 of them women, sat in her classroom taking notes as she explained the mathematics of extreme-range precision fire. A sniper's greatest weapon isn't the rifle, she told them, echoing words Art had spoken to her years ago. It's knowing when not to pull the trigger. It's understanding that every shot has consequences that extend far beyond the target. And it's accepting that sometimes the hardest shot to take is the one you choose not to fire. She looked at a photo on her desk. Young Art Martinez in Desert Storm standing next to Tom Rivers. Both of them young, invincible, ready to change the world. One of them would never make it home. The other would spend decades honoring that sacrifice. Sarah's satellite phone buzzed. A text from Art, "Coffee's getting cold, kid. When you coming home?" She smiled and typed back, "Next weekend, and I'm bringing the new Barrett. You need to see the upgrades." Art's response, "About time. These mountains are getting too quiet. Someone needs to remind them what a real shot sounds like." That evening, as Sarah reviewed lesson plans for the next day's class, her secure email pinged with a message that made her pause. Sender unknown, subject, Spasibo. She opened it cautiously. Inside was a photograph of a young girl, maybe 14 years old, sitting in a hospital bed and smiling. Below it, a single line of text in broken English, "Katya is in remission. Thank you for sparing her father. Some debts are bigger than war. If you ever need Dmitry Volkov, you know how to find me." Sarah stared at the message for a long time, remembering that moment in the mountains when she'd had a clear shot on the Russian sniper and chose mercy over the mission. Remembering Art's teachings about the warrior's code, about honor transcending nationality or uniform. She typed a simple response. "Tell Katya her father is a good man, and tell him that warriors who remember their humanity are the ones who truly win." The response came back within minutes. "He already knows. You taught him. Goodbye, American Angel." Sarah closed her laptop and looked out at Fort Bragg's training grounds. Young soldiers learning the craft that had defined her life. Some would face impossible choices. If she did her job right, they'd understand that being a warrior meant more than pulling a trigger. It meant knowing when to show mercy. The mountains of Montana waited. Art waited with coffee and stories. And somewhere in Russia, a girl was alive because Sarah had chosen to be more than just a killer with a rifle. She had chosen to be a warrior who remembered her humanity. 42 shots, 73 minutes, 24 lives saved. But the record that mattered most couldn't be measured in statistics. It was measured in coffee shared at dawn, in lessons taught to the next generation, in mercy, granted when killing would have been easier. Sarah walked out as the sun set her phone buzzing with Art's texts about cold coffee and mountains that needed watching. She smiled. Because that's what warriors do. They never leave anyone behind. Not in combat, not in memory, never.